We are now at our last question. Bernard Manin talks of four main institutional principles characterizing modern representative democracy: regular elections, the relative autonomy of the representatives, freedom of public opinion, and trial by discussion for decision-making. What do you think of this characteristic and also the role that parties have in modern representative democracy?
I would go back to Hans Kelsen, meaning democracy and parties, they live and die together. In the sense that if you cannot have a democracy without forms of parties. That doesn't mean that they have to have that kind of form of parties, because participation, as the word itself tells us, is a way of situating ourselves in one part of the space of politics. And so it's impossible even to think about politics without seeing things from a perspective instead of another one. Thus, parties and democracy, they are together. And so I also disagree when you say, not disagree, I would say differently. When you say, okay, you have parties without democracy. Well. If you have a monoparty system, I wouldn't call a system of parties. This one-party regime is not a party system. There are no parties. Parties needs to be more than one. Otherwise, it's not a part in relation to what? So parties are as an expression of political participation based on the idea that we are different in interest, we think in different ways, and we have to have the chance to show that difference by connecting to others. So it's a way, one, to solve the problem of weakness we have as individuals, because in a population of billions of citizens, my vote counts almost like zero. Hegel was right. So I need to associate myself. So it's functional, thus, associational functionalism, but is also functional for the selections and the formation of a new leading class. Fine, it's functional, but it's not only functionalistic, the argument, it's normative. And it has to do with political freedom. Unless you don't divide political freedom as simply having some rights, like in a liberal sense, that is a negative conception of freedom, that is fine. You don't need any forms of associations. Why should? You can have at most association for protecting interest or civil associations. But why political association? No, political association is a way to make the work of the citizen, the role of the citizen, equally relevant, not only that of the individual as a private person. So for me, the two are together. Then we have to discuss, is another story, what kind of parties, how they are organized, whether there is a democracy in between them or within them, so many other issues. But certainly, just to be very brief and schematic, democracy and parties, they go together.
Okay.
Céline, I just would like to go back just 1 second to the question on Bernard Manin's masterpiece, maybe before tackling the issue of parties. Following Montesquieu, like, Hannah Arendt did in The Origins of Totalitarianism, like Nadia did in her work on populism, I would tend to say that Manin is too complex in a way. Like saying that there are four principles of representative government. And especially, I don't think that free mandate versus imperative binding instruction is such an important principle of representative democracy. So I would tend to say, like, if you see representation since Condorcet, Benjamin Constant, okay, the nature of representation is delegation. The principle of representation, as Montesquieu calls it, is loyalty. And I'm sure you can still have all the debates that we have about, is it aristocratic or democratic participation or etc. So that would be my simpler version. I do think that, for instance, if you take consent and majority rule as the heart of the mechanism of representation, then the other things that Manin mentions are background conditions. Basically, it's background condition. Like, if you want actually to protect loyalty, like the principle of representation, the principle. If you want that, then you have to have the three other conditions: publicity of parliamentary debates, freedom of expression and association, etc., etc. So that would be my general view, if you wanted to tell me. Now, on the issue of parties, I'm more on the Montesquieu side than on the Rousseau side, actually. Of course, you know, as even Michael Sandel said, the issue with Rousseau is unanimism. Of course, everybody can't have the same account of the public good. So, of course, you need different political parties. And what Montesquieu actually understood is that as soon as you have different powers within society, you have different parties because they have different conceptions of how these powers relate to each other and how they should be balanced. And then with the 19th century socialism and that, you have the issue of like, will you fight for equality first, social equality, not only political equality, or will you say that liberty is always the prior value? So as soon as democratic politics appear, and as soon as the social question appear, of course you need political parties. You cannot have any democracy without this structuring antagonism. So that would be my point.